And good afternoon, good evening, and good night, and welcome to another Aussie Overlawd sit down. Today I'm joined by a gentleman who may just hold the world record for the most times at least that I've seen, of a single individual being fired and rehired by the same employer. We'll definitely get stuck into some interesting topics today, and hopefully we'll get to know a little bit more about Ryan the editor. Hello, Ryan. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I am fantastic. Thank you so much for agreeing to join me. So, for people that may not have come across you before, can you just give us a brief spiel as to who you are and when they can find you?
Oh yeah, I'm just Ryan the editor. I'm Nick Ricada's editor.
Mhm.
I've been working for him for a couple years now. I'm literally nobody. All I really pump is my Twitter, but I warn you, if you go there, it is my political venting space. So I don't talk about it 24/7 and want to just tear my own hair out. Not that I have much of it left anyway, but yeah, that's who I am.
Okay, fair enough. Now, because we first interacted a few on and off when when I first started engaging with Nick. But I think you and I first really we met and got to know each other a little bit was at Matsuri last year in August, and so your Nick's editor. How did that really come to be? Did he put out a post for a job advert, or did you just happen to?
Yeah, what had happened is back in, I think it was 2021, maybe 2020, he put out on one of his shows that he was looking for an editor to do
Mhm.
short form content. It was
Okay.
mostly after like the election stuff, and he figured out that he just didn't like doing short form content by himself that much, so he was willing to hire someone to do that for him.
Mhm.
And so on one of his shows, he's like, "Okay, I'm looking for an editor. If you're wanting to do it, just send in your resumes, and I'll look through them, and I'll probably pick one of you." And
Right.
then a couple weeks would go by and wouldn't really hear anything about it. He would still say he's still looking for an editor. And then there came a point where he said he wasn't looking for an editor. He got a bunch of resumes, and then nothing
Mhm.
was happening. So I would just about maybe once a week, I'd just in chat and it's like, "Hey, you still looking for an editor?" He's like, "Yeah."
Sounds about right. You have to keep
And
poking him to sort of.
it was like that for a month, and then just one day I'm like, you know what? My dad told me the best thing to do is just have a bit of initiative. And
Mhm.
so I went into his locals because this is when he was big on locals and really deep into it when it first started.
Yeah.
And I fell for the grift. I gave him $10 in order to DM him directly. And I'm like, "Hey man, I know you're still looking for an editor. I'm really willing to do it. Here's my background. Here's all this." He's like, "All right, I'll give you a phone. We'll talk about it later. I'll give you a phone call."
Mhm.
Uh, and then the next day came and no phone call. The next day happened, no phone call, and I would just poke him. And then I didn't get that phone call until about a week later.
Okay.
And he's like, "Yeah, we're willing to try it out." So
Mhm.
after
Okay.
that, I kind of got thrown in the fire though, because as soon as I started poking the bear was immediately when like Kyle Rittenhouse started.
Ooh.
The first videos I ever edited for him was the Kyle Rittenhouse stuff, and
Oh
like
damn.
I was behind on like a day or two. So I stayed up for like 24 hours straight, just watching the entire Rittenhouse streams on like 1.5 speed, trying to like create content and videos for him.
So, because I know that when you're working with someone, particularly with an editor, you basically just need to find someone that is effectively an extension of you, because it's not only does the editor need to get your style, your opinions on things, your um, basically they just need to get you. So,
Yeah.
was there any teething? Was there
Uh,
how did things try? How did those first few videos go? I suppose is what I'm asking.
the first few videos went honestly rather well in my opinion. They got way more traction than I thought they would, so
Hmm.
it gave me a lot of hope. But me and Nick hit it off really off the bat because Nick was obviously, I think he was born in either the late '70s, early '80s, and I was born in the mid '90s. But
Hmm.
my parents are Gen X, and so I grew up listening and watching basically everything that Nick did. So we
Hmm.
had a lot of common interests from me watching a show. And when we first started talking, it was just instant. Everything flowed well. There was
Hmm.
no bickering. A little bit of confusion, but that's just because of communication problems. So
Yep. Well, that always happens starting out in that sort of scenario. So you said you started off with the Rittenhouse ones. What sort of was um because I know looking back over some of the stuff that's been done, I mean, what was your sort of vision for those? Was it more just trying to find the really interesting parts, or were you trying to? Was there anything specifically that you thought was
Um,
important to get across, or?
it was mostly trying to recap some of the more important parts. So I think like the first video I did was I forget his name, but it was Kyle's friend that they had testify like day one. It was
Right.
trying to just summarize that because that was I think several hours worth of testimony,
Mm.
and you're trying to have to cut that down to about 20-30 minutes worth of content, maybe an hour at most. If it's like a
Yep.
5 hour thing, you're allowed to cut it down to an hour, especially if that hour is full of very important commentary and like witness statements and contradictory statements from the state versus like bombshell evidence from the defense. And
Hmm.
so it's going through that content and trying to I personally saw it as a very important issue, so I tried not to make a bunch of jokes in the videos as much as possible. But there were
Yep.
some times where the defense was so egregious you couldn't help but make those jokes.
Yeah. I mean, I when I did the rewatch of the coverage that Nick did, there were certain instances where people knowing that I was doing the rewatch were already sending me memes and expressing here's specific points where there's such ridiculousness in this trial that you have to make fun of it, and I was like, I'm not sure how I feel about that. I mean,
It's guy's
this
life on the line.
exactly. I mean, I know it's like reading like one of the major like it's like following up on a massive milestone in history because you know the outcome, but you know that there was it's like doing a history paper on the World War. You know that there was some horrible trauma involved, but at least you knew the outcome. And it's like trying to make a joke about the Allied soldiers or something like that. And I'm just like, oh, I'm not sure
Yeah.
I'm okay with this. But no, look, it turned out, when there was the meme about the hot female cop going up on the stand and that sort of thing, and then you've got everyone staring at her ass except for Binger.
Mhm.
Like, I may have used that meme, but I mean, it was so. So you're basically thrown in the deep end with editing out Rittenhouse. What had you sort of done before that? Like, were you a professional editor at that stage, or take me back to the start? How did you get into this sort of thing?
Well, I my college degree is in what we call digital entertainment technology,
Hmm.
is what my university called it, and it's mostly video game design. But through video game design, they give you a crash course on how to do everything from design and construction, 3D modeling, even to video editing in some parts for
Hmm.
your game. And so it's like I had very rudimentary knowledge on how to edit. People want to make it out like good editing can be very hard. Basic
Hmm.
editing, like what Nick was looking for at the very beginning of this,
Hmm.
it's not hard to do. You cut segments out, you put them together, you put a little transition between them, you're done. You're golden. It's good.
Hmm.
Um, but if you want to get good at editing, it does take a lot more work and a lot more time. You have to also use other tools like I use Premiere Pro.
Hmm.
And if you want good edits, you'll also put in stuff like After Effects and whatnot to get good like 3D model transition, like 3D effects and good edits and whatnot. You'll have that workflow between those two easy. But when
Hmm.
I first started off, it was my crash course, and I'm like, hey, I'm not the greatest editor, but I'm willing to learn in order to help us both out.
Yep.
And here I am.
No, fair enough.
This is my first
I'll
gig.
Cool. I'll probably have to ask you a few questions down the track because I'm just getting my head around Premiere Pro. I've been using DaVinci for the last year and a half,
Hmm.
and I don't know where all the buttons are yet.
Yeah, yeah.
But no, interesting. So I mean, then outside of editing, what is it that you do then? I mean, presumably this isn't your life 24/7.
No, this is technically, I like to call this my second part-time job. My first one is I do work for a small independent game studio in the town I live in. And
Sweet.
I would say its name and the company and whatnot, but just I've been told by
I
my
get it.
boss and shareholders not to bring anything of that up just because we're looking at releasing here very soon and nothing scares off shareholders and prospects faster than politics. So
Hmm.
Anything regarding that, it is what it is. But
Yep.
that is my main gig, and so
Okay. Fair enough. Um, do you mind me asking what it is that you do? Like in terms of, is it 3D modeling? Is it
I've done a little bit of everything. I've designed, I want to say about either a third or a quarter of the game's levels.
cool?
I'm actually in the process of revamping a lot of the weapon models in our game to kind of get them up to par. And I also spent I spent, what was it, all of November revamping like all of the icons in our game.
Okay.
And so I went through the process of revamping the icons. Now I'm making models to make them match the icons we're using. And
Okay.
so,
And so what sort of genre is it? RPG or is it first person
fantasy
shooter?
RPG.
Okay.
I do have an NDA, but I think at this point, since we have a demo of it out on Steam, it's very reminiscent of like old Baldur's Gate, like original Baldur's Gate.
Mhm.
Just a lot less of like the dice rolling, but like the main
Okay.
combat takes care of that RNG for you, so you're not having to sit there, and it's not turn based. It's more live action RPG
Okay.
stuff. So.
Sweet. Okay. Well, I'm not sure you would have said anything that would have breached an NDA there, thankfully, but that's pretty sweet. So, I mean, is that sort of where you would see yourself moving forward? Do you want to stay in the game development space going forward?
I personally would. I see a lot of potential in it, especially nowadays. I see the rise of indie games happening more and more with each passing year.
Mhm.
AAA gaming has done nothing but shoot itself in the foot.
Mm.
But because, like I said earlier, politics drives people away, and inserting modern day politics into a bunch of games that don't need them,
Mhm.
it drives people away, and it's driving people away. So they're looking for alternatives. They're looking for the indie market to go into.
Yep.
And I would love to stay in that as much as
Mhm.
possible. I want to make use of the degree that I spent. Me and my parents, we spent tens of thousands of dollars for me to earn, and I worked hard to get that degree. So I would like to use that still.
Yep. Okay. So I suppose then, if given that you spend your time doing editing for Nick, and then as you said, your main gig is working on an indie game, do you spend much time yourself playing games, or like?
More than I probably should. It is my go-to hobby. It's what I love to do. I find it more enthralling than just sitting down and watching movies and TV shows. Like I hate it because all my friends are like, "Oh, have you watched the show?" No. Why not? It's so good.
I hear that.
I like playing games. I hate the idea of just sitting there doing nothing. And yeah, the show, and like I'm about to force myself just to sit down and watch TV just because I am starting to get burnt out on just playing games, and I just
Mhm.
want to. I'm entering a phase to where I want to start creating stories, even for like potential new games that I could take to my boss and it's like, "What do you think of this?" Because
Mhm.
that's something, going back to like what I do for the game. I also have dabbled in writing some of the game's story, refining it, making it more cohesive, and parts connect. And it's not like, hey, that doesn't make any sense. I've been trying to make sure that we don't have that. I've been
Mhm.
bringing new ideas to flesh out certain things that might be confusing or don't make a whole lot of sense or aren't explained. And he's tasked me with reading like certain books and whatnot to increase that literary expertise, so to say.
Okay. So
So like,
basically diving into the lore of various other things so that you can make sure that it makes sense and that it's an immersive game experience. Is that sort of?
yeah, it's just to
Yep.
try and make sure that everything has its place and everything is there for a reason, and we're not pulling something out of our ass just to make sure something else happens correctly.
Yeah, I mean, let's face it. Well, there's been plenty of games and movies and TV shows. I mean, you know, when you're focused on a particular MacGuffin and it decides to make next to no sense, then the gameplay might be fun, but at the same time, it's like if it's not immersive and it doesn't take you away from reality, then what's the point of the video game? You could just be out screaming in the town square, sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So then what? So if you spend time trying to do this sorts of things, are you still like, are you playing RPGs, or like are we more likely to find you in a Halo lobby sort of thing?
Honestly, neither. I grew up playing more of just a single player experience. I've
Mhm.
grown to loathe just multiplayer just because it becomes people become so competitive, and
Yep.
it's like if you just want to be like, I'll say it. Multiplayer games have been ruined by skill based matchmaking because you'll have one good game and then it ruins the rest of your night.
Yep.
And so, because of like things like skill based matchmaking, I hate playing multiplayer games. But I do have friends that completely love competitive games. But I
Mhm.
like having more fun with my friends, so I'm willing to play those competitive games just to have fun with them. But if I'm on my
Yeah.
own time, no.
No, I completely get you on that because it's like, why? I mean, it's probably the stupidest thing I could say, but I play Halo for the story, and I play it almost exclusively on single player, and I don't really bother with Warzone or Forge or anything like that because I'm more interested in the lore. Like you can't really see it, but I've got 15, 20 of the books basically on the shelf behind me because I prefer the again being immersed in the lore and the world about it. And you're absolutely right. Going into a multiplayer game where it's purely just you spend a half hour to an hour getting teabagged because whatever, and it's just no. I completely get that. In terms of in terms of playing with friends, I mean, we used to play a lot of like Sea of Thieves and that sort of thing,
Hmm.
and despite reassurances from Ubisoft, Microsoft, and that sort of thing, like as to the cheating and that sort of stuff, like that really killed it for us. Um, and it's just like, well, it's a great game and all, but if you're not going to do anything about people teleporting across the map, and if you're going to not make it so that it's fair, I mean, I wouldn't have an issue with the cheating on, for example, something like Sea of Thieves, if the banning for cheating was equal. Like if it was just
Hmm.
if it was open slather and everyone could mod and do whatever they wanted and they could actually have some fun with it, I wouldn't have an issue with it. When you're on a server and two or three people are very blatantly using private cheats and you get killed over and over and over again and it just ruins the game, it's just not worth it. Um, did you play D4 at all over the last year or so?
Diablo 4. No, I've never been the biggest Diablo guy. I honestly haven't played any of them. I
Okay.
probably should. I heard Diablo 3 was really good.
If I had to take my pick, I mean, look, D4 was better than Diablo 4 was better than Diablo 3. Mind you, when I picked up Diablo 3, I'd been waiting for it for a good 10, 12 years because I used to play Diablo 2 with my dad. And the reason I was disappointed was because they had the always on internet connection and then the issue with the microtransactions and a few other things.
Yeah.
Um, Honestly, I think D2 Lord of Destruction, the expansion, is probably a epitome for me. But again, a good chunk of that's probably nostalgia. But I will probably pick that up once a year or so and rerun it because it's just love the storyline, love the gameplay, and it's old school graphics that still hold up. Like it's
Hmm.
not, yeah, but so can't really complain about that.
Like one of the games I play, not religiously, but a lot of is like Deep Rock Galactic.
Okay,
It's it. I love the simple. It's PVE. You go in, you drop in, you have an objective completed. You can play a game of a round of Deep Rock Galactic, and it can last anywhere from 5 minutes to an hour, just depending on how hard you make it for yourself and how hard the objective is. But
yep,
every time you do it, it's consistently fun. And even when like you die, it's like, yeah, I died because the game was insanely hard, not because I was bad.
yeah. I mean, kind of like you don't mind getting completely rolled by the game if it's to the point where it's not because you screwed up something badly. It's just you were up against insurmountable odds, which I think is good because a lot of things these days is that excuse me. I do find that new video game players are not learning humility, shall we say?
Oh yeah.
Like they're not used to losing a game, and it's like I've recently started letting my little one play Mario Kart on the Switch, and it's always, oh daddy, I didn't come first. I'm like, well yeah, it's a skill based game that you need to sit and spend time learning at to get better. And there was a few tantrums to start with, but probably over the course of a week, she's sat there, she's practiced, she's gotten better, and I'm worried that my 5-year-old's going to beat me in Mario Kart now.
She probably will. It's wild how good children can get at games if they like grind at them for
Mhm.
like a month, and then just like, I've been playing this game for 5 years, and you're somehow now better than me after a month.
It's basically what it boils down to. No, for me it was more because we were a little bit worried about like hand-eye coordination and that sort of thing, and I thought, okay, maybe this is an opportunity because it's got the 2 joysticks on it, and like using the different buttons and that sort of thing. And I was just like, okay, maybe we'll see how she goes with this. So now she sort of rotates between Peach and Baby Peach, and she's basically rerunning the same set of courses, but given that she's getting used to it and she's learning and but she's taking the losses better as well, which I think is really important because we're not seeing that a lot lately.
Yeah.
Everyone's sort of expecting things to be handed to them on a platter, and then when shit doesn't go their way, you wind up with a news report, basically.
Yeah.
To put it bluntly.
And that's been a big part of like us making our games, is like, my boss was wanting it hard. He comes from the idea of like, he was playing games in the 90s and early 2000s to where like checkpoints didn't exist. You had to save scum your entire life through the game and whatnot. But then we have another company that's helping us play test and like, hey, you need to do this, you need to do that, you need to have an autosave. And that's been a big contention between some of the guys on the team and this other company, to where it's like, their marketing, like they help market the game, and they watch reviews and comments and what people are wanting, and they send that to us. And then we're like, well, do we want that in the game? Should we have that in the game? Maybe that's a good idea just because of the way combat works in our game. It might be a good idea to where it's just maybe at the start of every level, you just get that free autosave. That way you're not losing seven hours of work, because like there's the difference between the autosave every 5 steps you take versus one at the beginning of the level. One still causes you to lose progress, while the other one is just like, oh, it's a minor inconvenience.
Yeah, and I do actually think that that's a little bit too much coddling and hand-holding, frankly. I mean, in terms of video games. And I have noticed that there's a lot of games lately where, excuse me, and in particular, the other issue with the 5-second autosave is if you screw up, you can royally screw that up as well. Like, if you manage to autosave right before, like the instant before dying, and you just you reload over and over again just to die, it can be a learning experience. It can be very frustrating.
Very.
But, no, I am more in favor of the sort of the game style where there is a consequence for dying, basically. And, I think that's why I liked, I never actually played the Dark Souls games, but the whole concept of, you lose your humanity if you die, you have to work through extra progress and all that sort of stuff, I don't mind that. I think it's probably a more harsh game than I would be used to playing. But I think that's probably what it's probably what this generation needs, really, going forward, because when you've got games where it's literally, as you said, you take 5 steps and it saves, it's effectively the equivalent of mummy and daddy holding your hand through the video game. And I know that there needs to, it's part of the whole actions have consequences things. And I think that might be part of what we're seeing in reality, is that people are going, oh, hey, doesn't matter how badly I screw up, because someone's going to catch me, and I'll just reboot after things happen, and life has consequences.
Life has.
So, because that's what I've always seen storytelling through gaming to be, is that it's teaching you things that you can't necessarily learn in real life. And I mean, we're getting into a weird point, because I mean, there was a case recently where a girl was SA'd in virtual reality, and now the police in the UK are investigating it as a real-world sexual assault, and
which is insane to think about.
Yeah, because literally, it's bridging the gap between real life and metaverse thought crime. I mean, she could have taken the headset off. Like, I'm not saying I'm not in any way trying to victim blame. I'm saying
she could have left the lobby. She could have done anything else.
It's the same argument to me as, TV shows make kids violent, so turn the screen off. Get them outside playing on the grass and that sort of thing. But I suppose this is the sort of thing that we're going to be involved in going forward as we spend more and more time online. I mean, I didn't even realize that Metaverse was that involved with virtual reality. I suppose I'm a little bit naive on that regard. I've spent very little time with VR. The most I've done was I had the PlayStation VR for the PS4. And even that was more just so that I had a screen to play on when the wife and child were watching TV.
Yeah. Well, Meta ended up buying out Oculus, which was one of the forerunners for VR gaming.
Right.
And Meta is also trying to dive into making virtual reality not only for video games, but for work, for entertainment, for anything you may want to do in virtual reality. And the only thing that's stopping you is just money. They're trying to make money and distance and travel time and whatnot. They're trying to make it to where you can do a lot of this stuff in virtual reality. Like they have it to where you can do like these little meetups and you can go to like a coffee shop and just talk with random strangers in there. And that's, I think, kind of like where that they were sexually assaulted in VR is like, it bridges that gap of like, okay, it's very personal. I can see my hands and interact with things in the world. And then some random dude comes up and acts like he's grabbing my boob or whatever. It's like, yeah, but he's not like he's playing, but he's not actually like, he wouldn't do that to you in real life. He's doing it to you literally because it's fake.
Yeah.
And to equate that to real sexual assault, it shows how, this is going to sound bad, it shows how weak-minded a lot of modern women are and that they'll take advantage of that type of stuff. Towards like, oh, he was playing, we as men is like, that's kind of funny. A woman goes, that's disgusting. And it's like, it's just a game. They don't stop into what's the real world harm of this.
Yeah, I mean, look, in her case, she's claiming, all sorts of trauma and that sort of thing. But again, I do think there's a level of she could have taken the headset off and mitigated the trauma. And I mean, again, it's as I said, I'm not victim blaming. It's purely just we're in this weird space. We're on the cusp of, as I said, bridging this gap. And to me, this one doesn't make sense because the UK police, for example, the UK laws are not equipped for this, and they're trying to apply standards that do not apply globally. And it's like if you're going to try and police the internet, really. It's got to be a Wild West situation where anything goes, or we wind up going down the track of like globalism, which no one really wants, aside from Klaus and the WEF. But it's sort of it's a very dangerous and slippery slope.
It is, and I have to kind of take a note out of like one thing that the Rittenhouse, like to kind of bring a small full circle, is like you keep saying you don't want to victim blame. Well, first thing is, are they actually a victim? You're not victim blaming if they're not a victim. Like, just because they say they're traumatized and they say they were sexually assaulted, were they? Because if they're not either of those things, they're not a victim. You can say you're not a victim to these people. That doesn't make it any more. It doesn't magically manifest them into being an actual victim of something.
No, now, that's very truthful. I mean, given that a certain individual lost part of their arm, does not make them a victim, particularly given that they were on the stand and admitted to being the one to point a gun at them, at Kyle first. So no, you're completely right there. I mean, I was more saying that because I haven't really looked that deeply into the details of the case. I mean, for all I know, she might have been hacked. I don't know. So that was more to cover the bases.
The only way I could see that being actual, like, justifiable sexual assault is like if we ever get to the point where we have like the haptic feedback suits that are like mainstream. So if you poke something in virtual reality, you can actually feel it on your finger. You can feel the pressure of someone touching you in virtual reality. Like it puts that pressure on your body. We might have a case then. But if anything, that's just more of a case of like, hey, let's not make haptic suits mainstream because this is the type of stuff you will be encountering. You will have random creeps in the VR world that will come up. And it's like, oh, it is the girl gamer. I am going to grab you and you are going to feel it. And it's like, let's just not let's not sell these if you know that's going to be a problem.
Yep. Yeah, no, that makes a little more sense. I think that the whole... I think the delineation between virtual and real world, I think, is necessary. I mean, we're not exactly at a point where, I don't think anybody is going to want to be in those pods from, like, the Matrix. Actually, you know what? There may be some weebs in the middle of, in a lonely hotel room in Japan or something that eventually want to
The
be in that
Japanese will make
situation.
it happen first. Purely for the boobs. That's where it'll start. I promise you. The weebs make things happen.
Yeah, well, I mean, I can see that they're already working on things to make, like, SAO-style deep dive technology, and the one guy that was working on VR technology that, just for the hell of it, made one that can kill you if you die, I'm just like, there's no way in hell I'm going anywhere near that.
I heard the only reason he made that is so he could get fired, because he was one of the original, like, guys who worked on Oculus, but he didn't want to work for Meta, so he built that so they would fire him. Because it was like, this is dangerous, you're fired. And he's like, thank God.
That's one way to get out of the contract, I suppose. Oh, that's funny.
It's like, it just comes back to the idea. It's like, oh yeah, here's show on why this is a bad idea in the real world. You know what? That seems like a good idea. No.
That's exactly it.
It's a warning, not an instruction manual. We shouldn't be making Sword Art Online because the next thing is that's going to lead to the haptic feedback. And then guess what? You die in the game, you die in real life. Congrats, you failed the litmus test.
Well, it's exactly the same thing, though. I mean, with everything that's going on at the moment, I keep seeing these memes online as, 1984 was a warning, not an instruction manual.
Yeah. It's just like, we're gonna make this. And it's like, that's not a good idea. Don't, like, you can make your MMORPG in VR cool, but don't hook do not hook up your Elon Musk brain chip into VR. It's not going to be good, I promise you.
It will not end well, no. It's like every like developer and scientist lately needs to have that quote from Ian Malcolm from Jurassic Park tattooed on their forehead. Just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Precisely.
Because, yeah, I mean, between that and, Musk launching for Mars and that sort of thing, I am curious to see exactly where we're going to wind up, because I do think at some point we're going to cause our own destruction. And I think that whether that's we try and copy ourselves into online or that sort of thing, I mean, I suppose that's the other thing as well. Once we take the virtual reality aspect out of it, if we ever get to a point where we can copy our brainwaves and upload ourselves completely digitally, how do we then account for that? I mean, if, because then if it feels like physical touching to a line of code, then then is it a crime? Is it
sexual assault by proxy? It's like, oh, he molested my digital self. Arrest that man now. It's like,
yeah.
Why are we trying to go down the, like, I feel like people are driving themselves down these paths just so they get to that eventuality, just for more control on people.
That would not surprise me, honestly. I mean, we're seeing so much, like I had a bit of a bitch about it on the show a couple of days ago. The Victorian government where I live last year, and now in the last few days, the Australian government instituted a whole raft of legislation that basically is controlling what can and can't be said by individuals in relation to specific things. I can no longer talk or display anything publicly in relation to Yahtzees unless it is of an academic purpose. Not that I even would want to or need to, but it's more the fact that it's like when your parents tell you you're not allowed to swear, and it just makes you want to.
Yeah. It's like, I wasn't going to talk about Nazis, but now that you said I couldn't.
Exactly.
I really just want to start making a bunch of Nazi jokes. Or Yahtzees.
About the government.
We'll edit those out. I'm sorry.
It's fine. No, that's fine. You can say it, I can't. So,
Woo.
But it's like, well, why? Like, I understand why they're looking to ban it, but the trouble is that things are creeping, because that was part of a anti-terrorism bill that they put together for the federal government, because they've specifically carved out the Yahtzees, but then in another section they talk about extremist material. Now, they haven't really defined extremist material. there's a carve out there for religious extremist material. So, people of certain faiths that are going to be,
That tend to be more violent.
yes, that's all fine. That's all completely ignored. Um, but then when you couple that with the mis and disinformation bill that they're trying to push through as well, so that they can basically control what gets said online by Australians, I'm terrified. I really am, because
I
we
would
don't
be.
have the equivalent of the First Amendment, so we've got no recourse against a government that is looking to control what we say and what we do. Um, and it's just like, well,
And the sad thing is that's probably why they don't want you mentioning anything to do with the Aussies,
because it's
because
exactly what they're
they're
doing.
they're going right down. It's like, hey, you can't point out that we're doing exactly what they did. That's bad. Stop that. Stop it, you.
Exactly. Um, no, I, as bad as it sounds, at some point in the next 5-10 years, I could fully expect that I'll get arrested at some stage for something I say, which is disgusting. And it'll be an interesting scenario, because I'm not going to be representing myself, because a lawyer that represents himself has a fool for a client. But I've completely lost my train of thought, because there was a third bill, and I cannot for the life of me remember what it was. But it's basically at a point where they really are trying to just institute complete thought. That's what it was. Thought control is that they're literally trying to control what people are thinking, and in the interim, they're introducing all this DEI crap at the primary level. Like, I went to my little one's just starting school. She'll start school next week, and we went to 3 or 4 different information sessions for different schools. And one of them that we went to, they had a whole raft of stuff that they were introducing at the kindergarten level. And I was just like, you might have high standards, you might be able to pump out good academics and that sort of thing, but that's all I want from you. I want you to teach my daughter that 2 plus 2 is 4, and preferably how to spell her name. Beyond that, I don't want you imparting politics onto her. I don't want you imparting ideology. I don't want any of that. That is not what school is for.
Mm-hmm.
So in the end, we wound up moving to a different school, and I think they're going to do well. The only trouble is that, of course, as with everything else, it comes down to dollars, and this school's particularly underfunded, so it's going to be interesting. But we're going to be teaching her a lot at home with, after-school care and all that sort of stuff. But the fact that the government's pushing for certain things to be taught as a requirement for the schools to receive government funding, I think is disgusting, honestly.
Yeah, and I that's the problem with public education, because it's state funded. It's the state school.
Mm.
And so it's like, that's the funny thing, is like, oh, you won't get state funding. It's like, but it's your school. Like, people tend to forget the only reason schools have to worry about state funding is they were at one point private, and they only sought out state funding because they couldn't make it happen on their own.
Yeah.
We need to start encouraging this idea of making schools private again, giving the parents the right to go to the school and say, they're teaching something bad, fire them.
Mm-hmm.
They're polluting your education. But because they're beholden to wanting money from the state, they kind of have to follow what the state has, because people don't talk about, this is extortion what the state's doing to schools. It's like, you have to teach this or you get no money. It's like,
yeah, and the irony is that we're going through a teacher shortage now as well, so we're having to import individuals from overseas and that sort of thing in order to teach our kids how to live and grow and that sort of thing. And as bad as it sounds, I do feel like that's having a detrimental effect on national pride, shall we say. Like, next week's Australia Day, and I have to, aside from doing the dawn service to remember and commemorate the soldiers that have passed, I'm probably going to spend a good hour ranting over the fact that it's at a point where a private company now is determining when you can and can't celebrate a certain holiday. Like, but I genuinely think that's starting in the schools. There was a time when when we had a school assembly of a Friday, we'd sing the national anthem, we'd sit and watch who got awards, we'd basically have a little bit of respect and pride in who we were, and all that's going out the window. And a big chunk of that is both because we're importing value systems from other countries in order to educate our kids, because, I mean, they say that it's because teachers aren't getting paid enough. I personally think that it's
usually the opposite. I think teachers tend to get paid too much.
I think in America that's a thing. For us, it's admittedly it's a reasonably underpaid thing here. But
That's
at the same time, I think that the better teachers are getting poached by the private schools for very good reasons. I think it's more just like if you don't fit the mold, they don't want you, sort of thing, which I think is becoming more and more of a thing.
and it's the cyclical cycle that has been. It started in the colleges, and then it started where we started producing teachers that were younger and younger and younger, and they get this ideology, that the Marxist communist ideology from college. And it's like, all right, now that you're teacher certified, go teach the next generation. Well, all they've been taught is the DEI, the communistic, the Marxist ideology, and then that's getting perpetuated on children. And like the simplest way to put it is like, when you were, I don't know from when you were in school, but when I was in school, the idea of like one person messes up and the entire class gets punished, that's like insane to ever teach a child. Is like one guy, the one troublemaker that everyone knows is a troublemaker, made a mistake, so the entire class is punished. And it's like, why not just punish him? We're innocent in this situation. We have no control. This is your classroom, and yet you're going to punish all of us because one person in the room did something bad.
Yeah, that's literally using the. I mean, that particular. Excuse me. That particular like methodology and that sort of thing is very reminiscent of the monkey and the ladder experiment, and I think that they're doing that deliberately so that when you, as you progress into adolescence and as you become an adult, you are part of a system where you keep other people in line, for lack of a better term. And I think I think a good chunk of that is what's led to a certain level of apathy amongst the general population, because we're so used to being. I mean, do you know much of? Have you ever heard about the monkey and the ladder experiment?
I know like the crab in the pot, but I don't think I've heard of the monkey and the ladder.
So the monkey and the ladder experiment was a scientist took 5 monkeys, put a banana at the top of a ladder, and every time one of the monkeys tried to climb the ladder, they'd spray all of the monkeys with water. And basically, over time, the monkeys learnt that if you climbed the ladder, irrespective of which one of them it was, everybody would get punished. Now, over time, what they did was they took one of the monkeys out and replaced it with a new one. Now, because the new monkey had never climbed the ladder, he tried, but without getting sprayed with water, the other monkeys punished him.
And he doesn't know why.
And he does not know why. And over time, they switched out all of the monkeys so that none of the original ones were there, but all of them would punish anyone that tried to climb the ladder and get the banana, because there'd been this taught system where if you tried to climb the ladder, something bad was going to happen. So they learned to self-regulate, and I very much see that happening in schools. Is that exactly what you said? Rather than just punishing the individual that is screwing up, they're teaching everybody that if someone screws up, everybody screws up, and therefore it turns into like Lord of the Flies, where everyone turns on each other, sort of thing. And I think that's genuinely something that's been by design. I think that's something that's probably. I mean, I haven't looked at what teaching materials are for becoming a teacher or anything like that, but it would not surprise me if that's being taught as a legitimate method for controlling a classroom. Because I do think that's something that is going to be pushed, is that if the population themselves are the ones that handle troublemakers, for example, then they're going to basically make it so that the government's job's basically done for them. And I'm terrified by the way that the government's going at the really the way that the world's going at the moment. Like, I look at my daughter every day and I'm like, what sort of world are you going to see in the next 10, 15 years? Like, what are we leaving for you? And it's like, well...
It's honestly been one of the reasons, like... It's one of the reasons I've been scared to date. Like, I want to start a family, but just looking at the world around me, and I know it's not an excuse and the black pill is gay and whatnot, but it's just like, it's hard not to be discouraged when you're just sitting here and you're looking at it and it's everywhere. And so it's just like, but there comes a point, like Nick says, you have to outbreed the bad. You have to raise the next generation to fight back against it. Because if you don't, you lose the fight. Yeah,
well, that actually brings me nicely to the next thing I was going to ask about, because, I mean, what are your thoughts on what's happening with the Texas-Mexico border at the moment? Because theoretically, you can't outbreed, 800 people streaming across a border in 3 months.
I I funny thing, I live in Texas, and I have
That's sort of why
grown.
I wanted to ask, because I wanted to know
I
what the local populace was like,
I, I
how they
have
were taking it.
I've grown up with this problem, watching it all my life, and it comes down to the fact that it's obvious what's happening. Like a lot, like people don't like to acknowledge it, but a lot of the United States' economic problems come from this the illegal immigration coming from the southern border. We're
Hmm.
talking millions of people are flooding into the country. They're willing to take jobs under the table for less money, and people are hiring them. They're taking jobs away from people,
Hmm.
and that's causing, like, people want to wonder why corporations have become so greedy. Is because at the bare bones, the foundations that these companies are using while they're creating their products, they're creating it off of effectively slave labor. They're paying illegal immigrants to do the job for half the pay,
Hmm.
and then they get to reap the other half of the money. It's like, well, why are they getting all the money? It's like, because we haven't stopped this flood of people coming in to do this work for less.
Right.
And the people that come over, and it's like, oh, these people are just disenfranchised. No, they're not. You see, like, a rotund woman who's coming from El Salvador, and it's like, I'm oppressed, and it's like, the only thing you should be oppressed from is a buffet. Like, you are not oppressed. Like, they come here purely for the luxury that they've been promised by people like Joe Biden, and the
Right.
fact that we're on, like, we're it's tensions are growing between the Texas government and the federal government here, because the Texas government passed its own law saying, well, the federal government's not protecting our border, so we're going to protect our own border. So
Yeah, and see that, and
we
that's
have
sort of what I wanted to ask about was what was the general feeling over there? Because, I mean, having seen that and now seeing the federal lawsuit against Texas over it, I mean, I presume Abbott is reasonably popular at the moment, given that he's actually trying to protect Texas interests. But
Abbott's in and out of favor. Tends to be, from what I see, people tend to like him when he does good, but they really, really hate him when he does the wrong thing. And a
right,
lot of people are hoping that he fights this issue, because as being a border state, we are impacted.
yep,
One thing I like to use as an example, like, Texas does have, like, ID requirements for voting and whatnot,
hmm,
but when it comes down to it, Texas has 254 counties.
hmm,
And in the 2020 election, I think it was only like 21 counties were blue, and it nearly caused the state. It caused the state to be kind of purple,
right.
and it's because all these immigrants are flocking to these larger cities, voting for Democrat policies, because that's what they promised. That's what they were told will give them the benefits, the free stuff.
That's sort of what I've been saying and it's sort of what I've been asking the Americans that I've been interacting with is how are people not seeing exactly what is going to happen there? I mean, yeah, sure. So again, using the example, there's 800 and something odd thousand that have streamed across that border since December. Sure, they're not going to be voting in this cupping election, but their kids will be voting in a future one. And how are they not going to feel beholden to the party that let them in?
Mm-hmm.
How is there not going to be this um, massive swing? And given now that they're suing Texas for shipping them across to the sanctuary states and that sort of thing, if you flood a red state with a whole bunch of illegal immigrants that eventually breed a new generations of Democrat voters, it changes the demographic drastically. And like, it kind of seems like to anyone that is half educated that it's a very obvious ploy. And I
The,
just
the
I
the only hope we have is that they tend to stay more with their, like, familial values that a lot of Hispanic cultures and Latin cultures do from Central and South America.
mhm.
Is they are very family oriented, and a lot of them, and I don't want to dissuade anyone that might actually be fleeing places like Venezuela and Colombia, these places that have had vast and harsh communist regimes.
No, of course not. Yeah,
But you do have to do that through the proper means.
yeah,
But also, we need to sit here and talk about, it's like, oh, well, they're seeking asylum. It's like, asylum seeking means they have to go to the closest country, and I doubt the closest country from Venezuela is the United States.
Yeah.
That's why we made a deal with Mexico and it worked. There's a reason why day one Biden squashed that deal with Mexico, saying they don't have to stay in Mexico anymore. Like, we had a deal to where if they were coming to the United States, they would have to stay in Mexico for a certain amount of time in order to go through the means properly. And immigration, the problem did start to decrease. But then
Yep.
day one of the Biden campaign comes in, quashes that deal, and now we have illegal immigration worse than we've ever seen before.
Yeah. And I mean, like, people make this assumption that all of the people crossing the border are all from South American countries and that sort of thing. But then you see people from Asian countries streaming in across the Canadian border as well. And it's like,
Somalis, and you see people from the Middle East, and it's like, okay, so, like, where are these people coming from?
yeah, and like from the numbers and the demographics that you're seeing as well, a good chunk of these are not necessarily individuals you would think are actually fleeing from war-torn countries or anything like that. I mean, a good chunk of them are males, aged 20 to 30, for lack of a better term, military-age males streaming in. If you're fleeing from something that is terrorizing and that is dangerous, why are you not going to be sending the women and children? You know, that's something that for some reason in the back of my mind I'm sitting there going, something isn't adding up. And
I don't want to say, like, believe me, it's very suspicious. But we also need to take it's like, yeah, they might be military age men, but we also need to take into account that a lot of these people send their most fit to come and work here for the money that they then
send money back. That was the other thing I was going to say.
It comes down to that fact. It's like, yes, they're all younger men, the men that are in their prime, but they're probably in their prime just to come and work. And then when they make the money, they may just leave. But that's also hoping that they don't try and smuggle the rest of the family in as well. But it is a fact that it's like, why, if everyone that's coming across the southern border is fleeing, they're being persecuted and whatnot, why aren't we seeing a proportionate amount of men and children, or like women and children along with these men? Why is it vastly mostly just younger men in their prime?
Yeah, because I mean, even if it is purely so that they can work and earn a living and then send the money back, I mean, that of itself has a detrimental effect on the economy, because you're taking money directly out of the US economy, out of circulation, sending it overseas or to other countries, and that means that there's less things getting spent on essential services in America, goods, and just basically just the basic general stuff, because it's not like these people are going to be paying utilities and that sort of thing, because if they're in that sort of situation, they're, you know, at least the ones that I've interacted with, particularly here in Australia, they're happy to have the gas and electricity off if it means they're sending money back to their family, which I understand. But for lack of a better term, I don't even want to say that, because that's just harsh and horrible. But they're basically drawing funds out of the US economy, which is not going to do any favors, is what I'm trying to say.
And when the US already has a lot of its economy, like manufacturing, not even in the United States, it's a double-edged sword, to where it's like, we're not making anything, and anything we earn is being shipped out.
Yeah,
exactly. So we're becoming this weird vassal state, where just people are coming in, we're bringing in goods from everywhere else, and then we're shipping them out. And it's just like, what about the people that want to be here, that have been born here, raised here, and they want to stay here? And it feels like those people tend to be the last ones thought about.
Yeah.
So,
but no, that's interesting. I know that sort of took a dark turn. It was more just I was curious to see how. I was just curious to hear from someone in Texas as to how what the mood was like on the ground, because it's something that I see. It's one of the few things that I really can talk about American politics-wise, because I generally try and avoid the Trump and the Biden stuff, but when you see that, I mean, state v. federal is always something that I was going to be looking at reasonably closely, especially once the lawsuit dropped. And, actually, I meant to ask, how did the people take it when they were threatening to bring in the federal forces? Like...
I'm obviously very conservative. My family and most of my friends are very conservative. We were all like, just bring it on. We're in the boonies, just like, we're ready. Just don't. I feared that it's going to drive like, if anything, right now might be the spark for like a second civil war. There's like three big things, but that's probably pushing one of the first ones to where it's like Texas fighting back against the federal government on this, because like Greg Abbott, he said he brought in the National Guard and he's like, don't let any federal agent touch them, and if they try to, shoot them. And it's like, first off, based. Second off, ooh, this is dangerous territory.
Yeah.
It's just like, there's something. It's the obvious answer. It's like, we have to make it stop somehow. Like, I go to the gym. I try to go to the gym as much as I can, and every day I see a segment on there. It's like the immigrants in Eagle Pass, Texas, and it's like, the fact that y'all have constant daily refreshers about this shows that it's a problem, and yet y'all don't want to stop it, and you're stopping the people who are trying to stop it.
Yeah.
Like, if the federal government's, whose one of the only jobs is to protect the borders of the United States, goes, nah, then what do
That's
you
pretty
do?
much it.
What
Well,
do
that's
you
it.
do? The state has to protect its own border too.
Yeah, and the whole argument that, oh, well, the federal government already has laws on the books. We're not going to enforce them, but we already have laws on the books, so this conflicts with what we already have jurisdiction over. And it's like, well, bitch, if you're not going to do your job, someone has to. Like, I feel like the lack of like, what do I call it? I think there's a positive obligation on the federal government to do their job. And if you're not going to, if you're going to fail to act, if you're going to omit to act, then I'm sorry, but I don't feel bad if someone else is going to step in and do your job for you, because your one and only thing should be to the people of the United States, not to potential voters down the track. Which, I'm sorry, but it's becoming blatantly obvious that that's what it's about.
And I think part of that problem comes back to the fact that people forget, and this is mostly comes back to ye old Civil War that the United States has, is that before the Civil War, the United States was effectively kind of like the EU.
Mm-hmm.
We were a conglomerate of smaller countries that have come together, countries have come together to form an alliance saying these are our agreed upon principles that we will all share together.
Mm-hmm.
But ever since the Civil War, it became this more of like an umbrella thing, to where it's like states, like Texas isn't seen as its own individual body separate from the United States anymore. It's seen as only a part of it. It's a piece of the whole puzzle. And it's like, we were never supposed to be that.
Yeah, and I think that's where America and Australia differ, because we were in sort of the same scenario in that each of the individual states were their own colonies. But then when we federated and it became a thing, it wasn't the United States of Australia. It was literally, yeah, okay, everyone's going to be governed. Federal's going to be over the top, and we'll have federal parliament and all that sort of thing. Whereas you guys, it's literally it's in the name of the country. It's the United States, and it seems like people seem to have forgotten about that, as you said. And
like, it comes back that people forget that we have a 9th and a 10th Amendment for a reason. It's to give these individual states, these individual smaller countries, supposed to have their own rights to do their own things as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so when it comes down to the idea of like, well, ever since the Civil War, it's like, okay, the federal government's going to protect our borders. Well, they're not doing it. So we as the state should, at least the minimum, in my opinion, something should fall under like a 10th Amendment jurisdiction of saying, hey, the federal government isn't doing this, so we're going to do it ourselves. It's our border too. Even if you want to say, okay, that's the federal border, and then you step 10 more feet back, it's like, that's the Texas border.
Yep, I said that about 2 weeks ago, and I was like, okay, fine. If the Texas border moves back 10 feet, and if the federal government's going to be a bitch about it, then it's literally all these illegal immigrants can walk within that 10-foot boundary to the states either side. Like,
the real funny thing I think we should do though is like give immunity. Like the Texas state governor should give immunity, governor's pardon to all landowners along the state border, saying you have immunity if you feel threatened or if you don't want these people on your land. Feel free to do with them as you wish.
Damn.
Like, not war crime level, but it's like you're allowed to shoot these people if you don't want them on your land. Like, don't go mass murder, but you're allowed to shoot and like.
Well, I mean, as bad as it sounds, I mean, looking at it from a criminal purpose, they're trespassing. If they are on your land and they are not invited, admittedly they may not be committing any other sort of crime. They may well be. We don't know.
What if
But
they're in the
yeah,
middle of being trafficked? We don't know. Like the federal government has said, these people are free and clear to allow trafficking. You have to let human trafficking occur on your property, and you can't do anything to stop it, even if you don't know it's happening. Even if someone is on your property, and Texas has a lot of like pride in our property laws towards like we have a thing called purple post laws to where you don't even have to build a fence. You just have to
right.
put fence posts within eyeshot of each other and color them purple, and that's your property line. You put a no trespassing sign, anybody that sets foot across that is trespassing immediately, instantly criminal trespass.
Then yeah, I suppose that would be a fairly quick and easy way to do it. Is just put up no trespassing signs, put them in English and whatever other language is necessary. But yeah, okay, I see where you're coming from with that.
And so you like if the federal government is going to fight us over this, we need to fight back because it, like I said, it is our border too. It's not just the Rio Grande isn't just what separates Mexico from the United States. It's what separates Mexico from Texas.
Yeah.
And if Texas feels like Mexico is a threat to us, we should have the right to at least fight back. That's what got us into the United States in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, I've been meaning to look into the Texas Constitution because I keep hearing from various people that there's certain things in there that were still included and kept, and that was one of the conditions why Texas actually entered the Union in the first place. But I've been meaning to have a look because I think if there's legs to that, I think that'd be interesting.
Well,
But
many states, when they entered the Union, had provisions that said they had the right to leave the Union.
mhm.
But this was a big thing during the Civil War, and some people may get mad at me about this, but like slavery was a big part of the Civil War. But the main reason the Civil War happened is states didn't feel properly represented. They felt unfairly treated by the federal government and the Union, and they wanted to leave. But when they wanted to leave, Abraham Lincoln said, "You're not allowed to," despite the agreement initially saying they had the right to leave.
Right.
And so that's another reason that the United States has become more of this catch-all term instead of us recognizing the state of Louisiana of the United States. It's more of like the United States has a state called Louisiana. That's a kind of a
Yeah.
big difference there, going back to the idea that we're supposed to be our independent entities as well. And so the moment a bunch of people said, well, we no longer feel represented, we don't agree with these values, even if that's on the basis of slavery, they wanted to leave. And then Abraham Lincoln just said, nuh-uh, and then plunged millions of people into war.
Yeah, and leading on from that, I can see what you mean, that this could well be something that leads to a second civil war, really. I mean, because from an international perspective, it seems like things are very tense. And that might be the understatement of the century.
I
But
don't know if they're as tense as they appear to be online. Like that's
well,
the bad thing
that's the
about
thing.
being
Yeah.
terminally online. It's hard to know just how bad it is, and
Mhm.
going out and walking about, you wouldn't know. But I
Mhm.
also think that's part of the problem is not enough people do know, and so it's this
Right.
weird limbo of like you feel like more people should know how bad it really is, but you're also kind of glad that they don't. That way you just feel normal leaving your house.
Yep. You don't have to worry about whether or not someone's going to. Yeah. No, I get that. Yeah. No, look, it'll certainly be interesting as to where it goes because Texas felt very similar to Australia. I'm not going to lie. When I got there, like just dealing with the people and like just being able to say hello, walk down the street, and that sort of thing. The heat. um, if I was to move which I'm trying to convince the wife. We'll see what happens. It probably would be to Texas, but we'll sort of see where we're going there. But
Well, Texas is a bit of a wild thing, just because we have pretty much every little bit of climate you could want outside of like tundra.
Mhm.
But so, like northern Texas can turn into like a tundra if it snows. So
that sounds pretty awesome, actually.
it's nice. I love it. Born and raised. I'm kind of biased.
That's fair. I can understand that. It's I'm still kind of biased about. Well, actually, to be fair, I mean, I've lived in. I mean, I've spent time in pretty much every state, so I think there's only Tasmania. I think. Have I spent time in WA? I can't remember. During my primary schooling years, I ping ponged around the country, and so I got to experience some really interesting areas, some very not so interesting areas, and then you spend a couple of years up in Darwin, and shit goes sideways, quite literally during cyclone season. So that was fun, but I mean, Darwin I loved because it was literally you could set your watch by the rain during the wet season. Like I would literally ask my teacher if I could leave school 5 minutes early so I could walk from from the school to my house before the rain set in, and it would almost always start just after I got home.
Yeah, it's never that consistent in Texas. Like I'll warn you, if you ever want to move to Texas, the weather is vastly inconsistent.
No, and that's sort of what I got was that it's more like Melbourne. Here in Melbourne, we will have 4 different sets of weather in one day. Like it'll be. You wake up, it'll be cold. You'll get a little bit of rain by the afternoon. It's sweltering to the point where you've got to put sunblock on, and then it very much reminded me of that. So
last weekend was the best example to where last Thursday it was in the mid 60s,
right,
and then it's like okay, it's gonna drop down to the 40s. Cool. So Friday it's mid 40s. Then it's like okay, the high for Saturday is going to be 19 degrees. The high for Sunday is going to be 22 degrees. Cool. What's the high for Monday? 65. In 3 days, we went from, I think here where I live, it went from a low of 12 to a high of 65 in a 48-hour span of time.
Oh, see, that's sort of what it does here, because we had a couple of days last week where I think. Don't quote me because I'm still doing the conversion off the top of my head. I think it was around the 95 to 107 mark.
Okay.
And then the next day, because we're on the ocean and it self-regulates, the next day it dropped to probably mid 40s.
Whew. Yeah, that's a big drop.
Yeah, because it pissed down rain and the temperature gauge just dropped like there was no tomorrow. And yeah, it fluctuates very wildly, but I have no issues with that whatsoever. It's more just you got to make sure that you've got you've got to have your seasonal clothes all year round, basically.
Yeah.
So, oh jeez. Oh. All right. Well, I think I pretty well covered everything that I was going to ask about. What you said you were going to force yourself to watch TV. What are you going to head off to?
Mostly anime. I'm a.
Oh shit! Well, there we go. We've opened up a whole nother can of worms.
I'm a bit of a weeb, but not as much as I want to be. But I'm also just like, do I want to be that much of a weeb? I don't know.
No,
But,
fair enough. I mean, I was sitting down yesterday because there's 2 that I haven't actually watched the whole way through yet, and I'm like, okay, so do I sit down and watch Assassination Classroom from start to finish to get through it again?
Yes.
Or
the answer
do
is
I?
always yes.
Yeah. Or because the other one that I was looking at is I've just gotten the daughter into some of the low level anime, so she's just watched Sailor Moon Crystal. I've started a show. People are going to lynch me for this one, but she's now watching Cardcaptor Sakura, and I was starting to look at other things that we could potentially watch together, things that I hadn't personally seen, but that were not necessarily going to be an issue. And there's like the dragon that goes house hunting, and there's a few other things, and I'm just like, yeah, okay, some of these are alright. And then, yeah, and it's, because doing YouTube, you don't always get time to just sit and watch TV. Like, I fall asleep listening to other YouTubers or to to a show that I've already watched over and over again, just so that I've got some sort of sense of normalcy. Mm-hmm. Like, I fall asleep with my earphones in, and I know damn well that I shouldn't. But no, it's interesting. So sorry, I jumped all over that. What are you currently watching?
Right now, I'm rewatching Jujutsu Kaisen with a
Yep.
friend just to get into season 2 because I've heard season 2 is really, really good.
Okay.
It's gonna sound dumb and gay, but one motivator that I came up with me and my buddy, we're both kind of heavier and we're wanting to lose weight. So we made it our goal is like, okay, we're gonna go to the gym 3 days a week. We're walking on the treadmill as hard as we can that day.
Mhm.
And while we do it, it's gonna be like 80 to 90 minutes. We're just gonna watch anime. Like
It's not bad.
like
Okay.
walking a treadmill in the gym can be boring. Listening to music can only get you so far.
Mhm.
So it's like, let's watch a show because you can watch 4 episodes of anime and be enthralled the entire time. Like that's
Mhm.
it's helped me stay motivated to walk. And so it's like we've watched we rewatched all of My Hero and caught up with that.
Mhm.
We watched a show called Mashal, Might and Magic. Really funny, by the way. It's basically Harry Potter if Harry was One Punch Man.
Okay.
Like Harry doesn't know magic, but he can punch the shit out of people, and it works.
Okay. Actually, I think I might have seen a short on that. Um, yeah, and look, and I mean, the other thing that I have is that I mean, a lot of people think that generic isekai or generic main overpowered main characters are just boring, and I'm just like, yeah, but sometimes it's good just to have something on in the background that you know how the storyline's going to go.
Mhm.
Just so that you can have something to enjoy rather than, I mean, it's it's the same as like people watching soap operas during the day sort of thing. You know what the plot line's going to be, but at the same time, it's still enjoyable. It's still reasonably fresh. Um, it's like, oh, I'm going to mispronounce this. Arafruida, the from Commonplace to World's Strongest. I watch that probably once or twice a month, just over again,
Mhm.
because like the story of the guy being transported into another world, betrayed by one of his classmates who's just a dick, and then just finding this will to survive and live despite a bear tearing off his arm, and it's like. If you can avoid the fact that the main love interest is like disgustingly lolly, which is something that I watch this show despite that.
Yeah.
If you can avoid that, then it's a great storyline. It really is. But again, it's a storyline that you would see in various other anime or manga that just like I just like watching it. Basically, it's the overpowered main character that is finding a will to live to try and get home, sort of thing. So
We watched Spy Family recently. Love it.
is that any good?
It's adorable. It's a great show. Just to like, if you want wholesome feelings, it's
Mm-hmm.
good. Season 2 actually had a really good like action arc that was it kind of out of nowhere for me at least.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was really good. It has some surprisingly good action because it's one of those shows where it's like, oh, this is kind of wholesome, and then like they have one guy has to go do spy work or someone has to be killed, and then it gets like the moment someone has to be killed, it gets atrociously violent all of a sudden. Like blood is everywhere, people are exploding, people are getting shot in the head, and it's just like. And then the next scene, he's back home with like his 7-year-old daughter, and it's just like, "Hey, how are you doing? Oh, I'm fine." It's like it gives you action whiplash in some of the best ways possible.
That actually sounds pretty awesome. Oh god. Alright.
And then yeah, we're watching Jujutsu Kaisen. I'm looking on my own time to watch what is it, Frieren Beyond End's Journey. I've heard is really
I'd heard
good.
things about that, yeah.
Um,
Because that's the one about the elf from the party that sort of defeats the demon lord, and then like she lives while everyone else around her dies, and that sort of thing. And like,
yeah,
I mean, I've seen clips here or there, so
yeah.
it looks interesting.
It's got it's got me interested just because the premise of like that idea of an elf that's lived for 600 years finally going through her midlife crisis and realizing she had wasted a bunch of time with friends and family that she's never going to get back is just kind of hilarious and wholesome at the same time, and I just want to see how it goes down. I grew up watching Dragon Ball. Loved
Yep.
it. Dragon Ball Super, I have a love-hate relationship right now, just because it's like it's the only Dragon Ball we have. But
But at the same time,
you're
it's
ruining so many aspects of the other shows. I hate it.
Yep.
Stop it, please.
Okay, controversial question.
Oh boy.
Where do you fall on GT?
First half of GT, not bad.
Okay.
It's not the greatest.
Yep.
You have to understand, first half of GT, they're literally gallivanting across the galaxy to find the Black Star Dragon Balls. It's not it's gonna be your villain of the day type storytelling. Last half of GT, they need to work it into canon somehow. I'm gonna say it. Maybe not Super 17. Super 17 was probably the last bad part of the second half of GT. But the baby arc, yes.
It was pretty cool.
I love the idea of it. Super Saiyan 4 needs to happen. They can.
Oh.
I have a plot line. I could make Toei, and I could make them millions of dollars with the idea of you can canonize Super Saiyan 4 by making it the true Super Saiyan God form. Like when any Saiyan that masters God Ki and they can elevate themselves into the realm of the gods, Super Saiyan 4. It's right there. It's plain and simple. You give them their tails back. You give Gogeta and Goku their tails back, which allows them to properly master God Ki because they're whole. That transforms them into Super Saiyan 4, the true Super Saiyan God. It's done. I have just made them billions of dollars if they do it.
That could actually really work, because I saw the argument that because Super Saiyan God itself was supposed to be just a one-off thing, because it wasn't supposed to be a series beyond that original Battle of the Gods movie, and the fact that then it's not, because it's not even really Super Saiyan. It's literally just it's a form where Goku has got God Ki within him, and so you've got the red hair, everything like that. Then he goes Super Saiyan, and he goes into Super Saiyan Blue, Super Saiyan God, and it's just. Not only is that a mouthful, it's just stupid.
There's a reason they changed it from Super Saiyan God, Super Saiyan to Super Saiyan Blue.
Yeah.
Which makes no sense either way. Like, it made more sense in the mouthful than it does the retcon name. But it's just like, I loved GT for the fact that it had the wild decision to say, what if we, like, they've obtained this vast amount of power and combat prowess. What if we give them their tails back? And it's just like, and the fact that they haven't even hit, like, the Broly move makes me think they're gonna eventually work there, because they talk about how Broly's like power comes from the fact he's more utilizing the Great Ape's power boost and whatnot, just in his human form. It's just like, give them their tails back. It literally magnifies their power by 10 times. You need them to fight the next big bad, and they can't figure out Ultra Instinct and Ultra Ego.
Yeah.
Tail. You can make the training arc exactly like it was in GT, to where they have to go to that giant millstone and work it till their tail regrows. Give them their tails back. This is the simplest solution for your next big problem.
See, and I think that's the problem with Shonen, because the whole idea is that it never finishes, and having to go and like up the ante each and every time with the transformations, with the additional power levels, all that sort of stuff. The whole idea of Ultra Instinct, I'm not even sure where they can go beyond that. So I think you're probably right. I think they probably have to work in Super Saiyan 4 into it, because, I mean, I think they'll probably have to work it into an additional level of Super Saiyan and utilizing Ultra Instinct and Ultra Ego itself. But oh my god, could you imagine like a version of Gogeta or Vegito who are already Super Saiyan 4 utilizing a combination of Ultra Instinct and Ultra Ego? And it's
Ultra Vegito, Ultra Gogeta. Like, they're using both. Like, it's wild to think that they could be used at the same time, and maybe they can't be. Maybe that's going to be a big thing, is they're going to try to do that, and it's like, oh, these are... You're trying to fit the circle into the square, and it's not working.
The immovable object and the unstoppable force, exactly.
And so... And that could be a big contention, but it's just like, final arc of Dragon Ball. Like, I have a definitive, this is the end of Dragon Ball plot, to where it's like, you go find the Super Dragon Balls again, you wish back Planet Vegeta. You give Goku and Vegeta their tails back. they have a big squabble. Vegeta becomes the Saiyan god of destruction, and Goku becomes the Saiyan god of angel, or like the Saiyan angel or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's just like that's where it is. You give Vegeta his entire pride. He's now the king of all Saiyans. He usurps his dad. His dad passes the throne on to him. Whatever.
Yeah.
But
hey, no, it works. I mean, at some, like you said, at some point they do need to, because I mean, it can't end with where they are at the moment anyway. So there needs to be something beyond that. So works as well as anything for me.
I'm assuming we're going to get another Universal Tournament of Power, just because that was kind of hinted at the end of Super. Just because it's like, oh, we're going to do this again. Because when I remembered, like, they didn't even have all the universes represented. It was only like the lower 6 universes or something.
I think so,
12.
yeah.
So it's like, they're going to get the newer heights, then they're going to fight the other universes, and then whatever.
Yeah, I mean, look, I can see maybe, like, I mean, for the ultimate ending, I'm thinking maybe there's some sort of corruption of Xeno. He like morphs his body into like this massively like fighter sort of thing, and maybe that's where they have to bring in. Yeah, I might.
They have to do with something with Xeno, though, right? Like,
Yeah, because I mean,
the child that like he is a child and he has to be corrupted at some point.
Exactly.
That's the social commentary of Dragon Ball is like children are easily corrupted.
Mm-hmm.
What if a child ruled the universe and we corrupted him? Bad things happen.
Yeah, mind you, then we're getting into sort of Ben Franklin Marvel twisting the reality sort of thing, but I mean,
we've already been twisting reality with time travel. Although I'll give it, Dragon Ball tends to have better time travel mechanics than 99% of mainstream time travel, which is wild to say. Like, they avoided paradoxes by saying, yeah, no, that literally created its own branch, and these don't intersect anymore.
Yeah, and again, I think that may be a way that they bring in SSJ4 is that if GT is legitimately its own branch off, if I don't know Trunks gets thrown off course or something and winds up over there, maybe Anyway,
well, they have the Xenoverse games towards like that's.
Oh yeah,
Xenoverse at first was a good concept, but then I've grown to hate the idea of multiverse type shit. I hate it. There's only one multiverse I love, and it's the Elric series. Does it perfectly.
Yep.
In that a multiverse exists, but you are the only you that exists in the entire infinitum of multiverse. And it's like, thank you. There aren't a billion versions of me. I am me. I am my own proprietor. There isn't evil Ryan because I stubbed my toe at 2 a.m. in the morning and I decided to go full Yahtzee. That doesn't exist. I am me. There's one character in the entire series of Elric that applies to, and it only applies to him because his literal soul was fragmented into millions of pieces.
Ooh.
So you have like this one character that exists in every universe, but that's only because his eternal soul has been literally shattered because of his betrayal of the higher gods. And he's like, as your punishment, you are broken, and he just shatters. Or they apply that his soul has been shattered, and that's why he's in like every universe, because he's trying to hide from his past evils and whatnot.
Oh, interesting. That doesn't sound. What'd you say? It's Elric. Okay.
The Elric saga. There are 3. You have them in here with me?
Oh, don't stress. I can look it up. That's fine. That sounds really interesting, though.
They have these saga books that they've been making. There's 4 of them out right now, and they're really good. I've listened to 3 of them on Audible. They're good listens, good reads. And it's old sword and sorcery fantasy.
Oh, see, that's the sort of shit that I like. I'm gonna out myself here a little bit because it's a little bit like less classy reading than what it probably would be at this point. But I want to find as many of the Tamora Pierce books as I can so that I can read them to Scarlet, because that's really like your old school sort of fantasy knights and magic sort of stuff. But that's really what I grew up reading prior to, like, I mean, everybody read Harry Potter, but for me that was sort of a door that opened. I mean, I may or may not have read Philosopher's Stone, Sorcerer's Stone during class. Like one day, I read the entire book. I didn't do any work during class. I just sat there reading the book, and I don't know why, but all the teachers left me alone, and I was just sitting there reading the book.
He's being productive. Don't interrupt it.
Basically, that's what it boiled down to.
He's actually learning.
No, well, it was weird because I was like the goody two shoes in school. No one will be surprised by that in the slightest. My parents were actually happy the first time I got a detention. And like, but from there, I went to the library and I'm looking through all these different books and, you know, finding the Broken Circle saga and finding, and the Rift War saga, Raymond Feist or Feast, however you want to pronounce it. Magician, Silverthorn, Darkness at Sethanon. Loved that stuff. Wait, Darkness at Sethanon? Am I getting that mixed up in my...
Yeah, you could fix it in post.
Yeah, basically. Oh, look, I tend to go pretty raw with these just because I suck at editing, but yeah. But no, I want to be able to introduce that to her because unfortunately it's one of those things that her mother never got as a child was because she grew up in a fairly religious household. I mean, she didn't experience those sorts of things. And I find like my love of reading came from that and I want to encourage that in her. And you would not believe how difficult it is to find these books, like, because they're out of print. So I'm having to try and locate them on eBay and then, you know,
go to bookstores and try and just find them, like second sale bookstores, and
exactly
just happen to be on the shelf.
Mind you, every time I walk into a bookstore at the moment, I'm coming home with comics. So, like, I just got the Batman and Flash Button Deluxe Edition for Christmas and that sort of thing, and I'm just like, do I want to open it? Do I not? I kind of want to keep it in the plastic, but at the same time, I really want to read it.
The way the market's going, is it going to be worth anything?
Well, yeah, I mean, to be honest, I don't collect them for the monetary value. I collect them because they're great stories. Like the other one that I grabbed over Christmas was Volume 1 and 2 of the Injustice series, and people can say what they want. The Injustice timeline storyline I really enjoyed. Because I like again, it's the corruption of the Golden Boy, basically, and I think that's why I liked
of the infallible symbol. They finally broke him, and people loved the idea. And people don't like Injustice is the reason we have things like The Boys. Why we have all these. What if Superman was evil? And it's just like it stems from the idea of injustice towards like he was broken.
And I think that's why I got so annoyed at Elijah Schaffer the other day when he put out that post about tall poppy syndrome is just an Australian concept. I'm just like, bitch, no, it's not. Are you serious? It's ingrained in certain areas of culture that we like watching people burn. And I don't know if you've seen Brightburn. Basically, it's a horror version of what would happen if Superman, as a kid, turned evil.
Yeah, I know of it. I haven't watched it, but yeah, it's like as a kid, he just had that evil instinct inside of him.
Yeah, and he just basically turned murderous, and it was, as a movie, like, I think it could have been done better, but at the same time, I enjoyed it. And, yeah, and that's just why I got so annoyed, because it's like, well, you know, everyone has this within them, and to say that it's a uniquely Australian concept to get pissed off when, you know, people undeservedly obtain success or whatever, that's just him being a dick, frankly. And that's why it's, I think the last time... Because I got so close to calling him a dick to his face, but I logged into that show with Nick about 30 seconds after he left. I'm just like, damn it! But no. Anyway, well, look, we'll probably wrap it up there. Okay. So, thank you so much for coming on. I very much appreciate it. It was great to be able to get to know you a little bit better. Hopefully... Chat's enjoyed it. If you've got any questions or queries or comments or anything, throw it down in chat and I can, you know, follow up with Ryan. But as always, peeps, stay healthy, wealthy, and wise. And remember, you are not a piece of shit. You have value and you do contribute to society, especially if you've checked that like button and maybe just consider subscribing. But as always, people, fuck this shit. I'm out. And that's fine. Then I can play it afterwards. That's fine. So, yeah.